Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Holler Board Games. I'm Dave, and I am here today with a review for Elden Ring, the board game, The Weeping Peninsula. Now, Joanna is not here with me today because I have played through this one solo. For those of you that don't know, Elden Ring is a fantasy adventure board game based on the fantasy adventure video game of the same name. Now, Elden Ring, the board game, is split up into kind of three different experiences that are either standalone or played together in one longer campaign. So the first of those, and it is considered the beginner box or the starter box or whatever you want to say, that is the Weeping Peninsula. Then the main game is Realm of the Grafted King, and there is an expansion after Realm of the Grafted King called Stormvale Castle. This one is just covering Weeping Peninsula. I've played all the way through this one. That's why we're doing a review on it. I have not yet played all the way through the Realm of the Grafted King. I'm working my way through it right now. We'll have a review for that when it's done. Elden Ring is a board game for 1 to 4 players that plays in about 90 to 120 minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a brief rules overview real quick. We'll cut away to that. Then I'm going to come back with my likes, my dislikes, and we'll go and give it a score, and we'll talk through that. So I'll get you guys over to a rules overview real quick so you know how it plays. So let's go to that. All right, guys, let's get to a brief rules overview of Elden Ring, the board game. I'm using Realm of the Grafted King components here because I have them out, but it's the same exact system from Weeping Peninsula, so it's all the same thing. So you're going to start out having this scenario book, and this game is kind of broken down into one of 3 types of scenarios each session that you have. And the first type of scenario is a narrative scenario. And long story short, when you have a narrative scenario, you are just going to have a book that has several passages that you read, and you're just going to make decisions and choices, and it is essentially a choose your own story adventure. They're super quick, they're super easy, but that's literally all the narrative choices are, all the narrative missions are, is just choosing that. So that's the first, that's one of the first types of scenarios that you're going to have. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about the second type of encounter that you're going to have in Elden Ring, the board game, and that is exploration scenarios. So these, you are going to be essentially building a map as you go along. You're going to be drawing tiles off top. Your character, your mini will sit on these tiles. And as you draw them, you are going to be putting things on them, different tokens to represent different things. So you're going to have some of these will have enemies that you can fight. Some of them are going to be crafting elements that you can pick up that you can use to craft recipes for things later on in the game. There are lots of different recipes that you can make, and you need crafting materials to do those. There's also going to be things that you can get in here like hardships, which are essentially like challenges. A foe appears and you have to draw from your deck of attribute cards to see if you can pass that, and it'll say like, you need 5 is the total number, and the head symbol counts for 3, the body symbol counts for 1, and you're drawing a couple of these signs, and you can see like if the head symbol counts for 3, then there's 4, and then there's 5, and so I've successfully completed that one. And if you don't, there will be some punishments in there for you. It's a very simple system. You're also going to have, as you are doing this, you're going to have 2 decks of weather cards that you draw from, and they are just going to be how time passes. The weather cards may make you draw an event, and if you have to draw an event, you can see that some of these weather cards, you flip them over and they just say time passes, and then there's some of these. Let me see if I can find one here that will say like this one says draw a card from the event deck. And so drawing cards from the event deck, that can be good or it can be bad for you. It just depends on what the event is. I've actually ran into more that are good than bad. I'm not 100% sure if that is intended, but that's the way that it has turned up for me. There are also going to be enemy combats as you build out this map, and as you keep going, and you make it bigger, you're going to run into certain things, and you're going to have to face certain enemies. And say you come across an enemy. Well, the enemy will tell you when you go to face it, well, it'll tell you turn to this page in your map book. And so you'll turn to this page, and then you'll have your whole enemy kind of thing here, and you'll put yourself out, and you'll put the enemy miniatures where it tells you to put them out, and then you'll enter combat. And I'm not going to explain combat here because there are specific combat scenarios, but just understand that it works largely the same way here. The only difference is that in this exploration phase, you can everyone has their own version of this book. So it's not just the one book. Everybody has their own version. So if you're all out exploring, you could fight this combat totally on your own because this will be just your combat because you discovered it on the map. Another player could be all the way across the map and discover another type of combat, and they could have their own book open. Now, there are ways for you to join your friends if they put up a combat and they say, oh man, this one looks really tough. Can you come help me with this one? There are ways for you to go in and help them. You can just choose to start with them at the beginning, or you can spend these tokens that you get, these effigy of the martyr tokens that you can collect along the way. You get them from exploring, and you can choose these effigy of the martyr tokens, and that will let you just scoot over in the middle of someone's combat to help them out, to help them along with that. So that's kind of the way the exploration phase works, and you just go on until you complete whatever the scenario goal is for the exploration scenario. And it's usually like uncover this tile and then move on to it and then explore, and it gives you like the area. It's very exploration based, but it's also a very simple system. So that kind of covers the exploration aspects of the game. All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the third type of scenario that you'll encounter in Elden Ring, the board game, and that is going to be the combat encounters. So these scenarios kind of take a couple of different flavors. They will have one of which is called a gauntlet, which essentially you're just going to fight sort of waves of different enemies that are going to come out depending on which round of combat it is. Then you're going to have dungeons. Dungeons are sort of like gauntlets, but they're a little bit bigger. They're a little bit more in depth, and a lot of times they will have a boss at the end of them. And then you're going to have boss encounters, which is just purely you fight a boss. Now, most of these encounters start with taking all of those books that I talked about from the exploration phase, and everyone is going to open their book to a certain page. You're going to push them all together, and you're going to form a bigger battlefield out of those books. You're going to have the tarnished, or the players' heroes here. You're going to have the enemies over here, and you're going to play this combat. So let's talk a little bit about how the combat works. So one thing that you're going to do is you're going to take all of the players will have these initiative cards. All of the enemies will have their cards, and what you're going to do is you're going to shuffle those all together, and you're going to form what is called a marching order. And so if this was our marching order, I'm playing solo, so you get 2 initiative cards if you're playing solo. So if this was our marching order, I would go, and then I would go again, and then the Godric soldier A would go. And the way that you'll keep track of those is by just putting these tokens on the board to mark which one is A, which one is B, and things like that. So basically what's going to happen is when it is the enemy's turn, they are going to have some instructions on their card. So like this one says move the enemy left or right one, and they'll move towards the closest tarnish. And then if you can't do that, you move them forward one, and then they're going to hit everyone in their row, or the first person in their row, because it's only one square, the first person in their row for 3 damage. So if this was me, they would be hitting me for 3 damage. And now essentially the damage in here is really low, so I would start out like I only have 5 health right now, so 3 is a lot. But there are ways that you can defend against that damage. You have abilities in your deck that are defense abilities. And so like if I wanted to play this card to defend myself, this would be a focus defense card. And what I would do is I would draw one of my attribute cards, and it will tell me on here that a head symbol is worth 1 and a body symbol is worth 1. So that would let me defend 2 against that attack, and that would make it only do 1 damage to me. But then this special ability up here says that if I spend a mana, essentially, then I could also reduce that damage by 1. So I could spend that, and I could completely negate that damage. So that's pretty much how defense works, and combat on the player's end kind of works the same way. When it becomes your turn, you will have a hand of cards. My hand limit is 4. And in that card, you will have different attacks. Like, for example, this one is Glintstone Pebble. And Glintstone Pebble, if I play it, it will cost me 2 mana. And so I will take my dial and I will just dial that down to represent that I have that. And I will also draw from my attribute card. So if I draw from my attribute card here, you can see that I drew another head and a body symbol. So the head does 2 damage, the body symbol does 1 damage. So this would account for 3 damage towards one of these enemies. And these particular enemies only have 3 health and no armor. So this one attack would kill one of those guys. It's not always that simple. But that's generally the idea of how it works. You draw a card, you decide which attack you want to do, you draw an attribute card, and you decide, and you look and see how much damage you do. Now, there are different things that kind of change that combat up a little bit. You'll see here that you have different rows on the enemy side with things beside them, and rows on the player side with things behind them. And so, for example, if the player is in this row, or if one of the enemies is in this row, this is a critical hit row. And so what that means is that when I attack this guy, then I will draw 2 cards for my attack, and I will choose whichever one I want. So I can kind of choose which one does the most damage for me. There is also this middle row here that says reposition, which means if my initiative order would have came out like this and the Godric soldier would be going first, then I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is be able to reposition one of these cards, which means I can move one of my astrologer cards in front of him if I'm in the reposition row. The last row back here is the stand fast row. That stand fast row means that every time I play one of those defense cards we talked about earlier, I'll get to draw 2 cards. And out of those 2 cards, I'll get to pick whichever one I want, which gives me the most defense. And the enemies over here, for example, they have a powerful attack row. And so if they are on their powerful attack row, when they attack, if he is back here and attacks me with a powerful attack, that will mean there's nothing I can do to block that damage. So these positionings on the lane, they change things a lot. And that's generally how the combat works as you go throughout the course. You have flasks here on your player board that you can take. One of them is for health, one of them is for mana, and you can flip those over and completely refill your health, completely refill your mana at any time that you want to. And this is generally how combat is going to work. Even if you're playing in the exploration mode and you're on one of the single pages, you're still going to have these guys that will tell you what position you need to be in to do certain things, what position the enemy needs to be in for them to do certain things. It's a very neat system that they have here. And if you're fighting a boss or something, instead of if you do damage to an enemy, you'll put tokens on them up here for how much damage that you've done, and they'll keep track of it that way. If you're playing against a boss, you have boss dials that keep their health, because frequently their health is, higher than the regular enemy, so it takes a little bit more to kill them. But that's generally a brief idea of how combat in this game works. It's super quick. It's super fun. I really enjoy it. So let's go ahead, and now that the rules overview is over, let's go ahead and get you guys back to the review. All right, guys, welcome back from the rules overview. So let's go ahead and get into the review. Let's start out talking about the Weeping Peninsula with some things that I like. So one thing that I really, really, really like about this game is the speed of the game. As you've seen in the rules overview, it's kind of broken down into 3 different types of encounters, scenarios, whatever you want to call them. Those narrative ones where you just read from the book, those are usually really super quick for me. I mean, we're talking 15 minutes. And even the boss fights, the gauntlets, all of that, and even the exploration missions, they didn't take too long for me. I don't know exactly how long they advertised this full game is. And once again, I'm playing this solo, but I finished everything, every quest in this box in 12 hours was my overall time. And my average play session was about 51 minutes each. So for a game that is the kind of the size and scope of Elden Ring, to be able to sit this down, play it, get it done really quick, I really, really, really enjoyed those play sessions. The campaign is replayable. There's a lot of stuff in that box that I didn't see coming through the first time. So it definitely is a replayable campaign. I don't know if I'll ever replay this version, and we'll get into that later. But I do like the speed of it. I like the time of it. I like how quickly it was to get through all of that. That is one of my main likes about this game. It's really nice to play a campaign game and not sit down to 3 and 4 hour long sessions. So I really like the speed of the game. One of the other things I really like are those narrative missions. I played the video game Elden Ring a lot, and uh, the story was just whatever. I mean, it's not what I was there for. So when I seen that there were narrative missions in this game, I was like, okay, I guess I have to deal with this story in that aspect. But the narrative missions do a really good job of setting the theme and the tone of the game, and they're so quick and they go by so fast that it's not a hindrance, it's not a burden. It's really nice to actually have that set the scene, set the feel of everything, and do it that way. So I really found myself enjoying those narrative missions when I didn't think that I would. Uh, Another thing that I really like in this game is the boss fights. Of course, it is an Elden Ring game. If you know anything from software, if the Dark Soul games, Bloodborne, anything like that, these are their boss games, right? Everything kind of revolves around the bosses, and Elden Ring is no different. The boss fights are by far where this game shines for sure. I really, really, really enjoy the boss fights. I've done a couple now in the Realm of the Grafted King too. Once again, it's not for that game, but it's the same mechanics and everything. Um, but those boss fights were really good. I feel like this box took too long to get to those boss fights, and there's not a whole lot of variety. But when they did show up, they were the best parts of this game by far. Another thing that I really like about this game is the quality of the minis. The minis are fantastic here. As typical with Steam Forge, they always have really good minis. There's no difference here. I really like those. I really like the size of them and the scope of them, the bosses versus the regular enemies, the way you push all of those books together, which you've seen in the rules overview, and the way that the way that kind of handles that combat and does everything. It really makes you feel like you're fighting that boss, and those minis being so in depth and so large are really a big help to that. The minis here are super high quality. A lot of games I feel like, well, standees would probably do the trick on. Here I really, really, really like the minis. I really like the minis for this game a lot. Another one of my big likes for this game is the combat. So the combat at first seems like it's going to be kind of bland or boring, or just not, it's not as flashy as a lot of other games, I guess. You only have your deck of combat cards, and you're drawing out of here and you're drawing attributes to see what you do. And at first that seems like it's kind of going to be meh, whatever. But once you really get into maximizing your place on these books, which lane you choose, which area you want to be in, whether you want to do critical hits, whether you want to reposition your initiative cards. Once you really get into that stuff, the combat is really, really, really fun. I also really, really, really liked upgrading in here. I liked collecting the runes. I liked the way that I could upgrade my weapons to get me new cards to go in my combat deck. I liked the way that I could upgrade my attribute deck. It feels really good when you start out with a bunch of really generic cards here in your attribute deck, and then you start to put better and better and better cards in there, and so then you're drawing and you're doing more and more and more damage because you've got better symbols on your attribute cards, or you're able to defend more because you've got better symbols on your attribute cards. And it actually ended up being one thing that I really, really, really enjoy about this game. Like it was. I was expecting to enjoy it, but not as much as I did. It really surprised me with how in depth the combat is and how different it is. I mean, it's kind of a Steam Forge staple. Like their games are all kind of sort of like this, but this one really kind of knocked it up that next notch for me. And I really, really, really liked the combat in this game. It kept me engaged the whole time I was playing it. Obviously, I just one after the other mission, boom, 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 to get this done, in 12 hours. But I wasn't rushing; it was just sitting it down. But a part of that reason was because I would get done with the combat and I'd be like, "Wow, that was really short. That was really fun. I'm not exhausted. Let's do it again." And then I would set up another mission and I would play it. Oh, well, that was really fun. But now, maybe I'll do a narrative mission. So that break and that pacing of the combat, of it being fast and speedy, there not being a ton of setup, I really found myself enjoying all of that quite a bit. So I think that covers all of my likes for the game. Let's go ahead and move to the dislikes for this game. Now, there are going to be several in this column. Don't take it that I don't like this game. I do like this game, but I do have some issues with it. So let's go ahead and get into the dislikes and let's talk about those. My first dislike is coming from an Elden Ring perspective of what the video game is and what its staples are, is difficulty. I feel like certain games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls and the games that came before this, you could very much get kind of stuck. Well, there's a boss here. I can't beat this boss. I have to just bang my head against that wall over and over and over and over and over. Elden Ring opened that world up a little bit, and it did make things a little bit easier, in my personal opinion, in the video game. That being said, I was expecting the board game to be fairly difficult. And I didn't get that from it. It was fairly easy for me all the way through. I had a lot of fun with it, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like a walk in the park. It wasn't one of those things I didn't have to think about it. It was a strategy, and it was very in-depth combat and stuff like that. It just wasn't as difficult as I expect it to be. And I worry when you're coming from having an IP like Elden Ring, and people know what that IP is, and they know what to expect from it. You're going to have a lot of video game fans that have not really ventured into board games very much, buying this box, especially because this is the starter box. This is the Weeping Peninsula is the starter box, so it's kind of being advertised as the beginner experience, which I also have a problem with, which we'll get into later. But I feel like they may play this and they may be like, that was really super easy, and I don't, and now maybe I'm obviously very into board games. I've played board games for a very long time, so maybe it's not easy for someone who has never played this style of game. Maybe they would come into it and kind of be blown away by all of the mechanics and things like that. But for me, this one just came off as pretty easy. I didn't really run across anything that challenged me until the later missions with the bosses. And that's why, one of the reasons why I said the bosses really shine in this box, is because I feel like they're one of the most engaging aspects of it, and there's too few of them in here. Like I said, there are certain things. I'm going to talk about another game for a second, and that is Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. It comes in, and it is also an IP game, but I feel like it goes the other direction. It is very complicated to learn. This is very simple to learn. I feel like the combat and everything in Betrayal of the Second Era is very hard, and I feel like this is more simple. And I just worry when you have those IP games, if you're trying to grow if you're trying to take video game fans and make them board game fans, there has to be kind of a middle ground that's struck there, where you challenge people, but you don't overwhelm them, and you make them want to have more experiences in this space. And I worry that the Weeping Peninsula starter box, entry box, whatever you want to call it, the beginning of this campaign, I worry that it is too easy to engage people. I feel like there's a middle ground that needs to be struck there. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just me having years and years and years of board game experience. Maybe I find it easier. Maybe this is the right difficulty, and maybe that's what it's made for. Maybe it's made for people who have never been in this space before, and now they are, and so they're kind of learning. Which brings me to another couple of problems that I had with this box. Is it feels like a really long tutorial. 12 hours is not a super long time to spend with a board game, but pretty much until the last two or three missions of this experience, it felt like a really long tutorial to me. And I started the Realm of the Grafted King, and I've already struggled more with the first boss of Realm of the Grafted King than I struggle with the last boss in Weeping Peninsula. So I just feel like there's maybe a difficulty kind of problem there going from this one. Maybe Weeping Peninsula is too tutorial focused, and that's okay. But is it okay at $120? At $120, you're asking people to pay for a 12-hour long solo. Once again, solo for four players. It could reach up into that 20-30 hours, especially if you have people who are slower to play and things like that. But for me personally, 12 hours, you're asking people to go through that tutorial for $120, and that is a steep price to pay to get in to get into this, and especially to not really have it pick up really good until the last three missions, and those last couple of bosses and the last couple of gauntlets that you face and things like that. They were difficult, and they challenged me, and they were fun. But the first little bit of the game seemed pretty easy, and I just kind of blew through it. And I worry that people will bounce off of this one, or not buy the Realm of the Grafted King box, even though it seems to be way more in depth than this, and it seems to fix a little bit of the problems that I had with, with some of the difficulty and stuff in this game. So something else that I want to talk about in my dislikes with this are the components and the way the components and the combat and things like that are done. Uh, so when you have these initiative cards, these are for my character, but when you have these initiative cards for the enemies, they will have a letter in the corner that says A, B, C, D, and that is what you use to identify which miniature goes with which initiative card that you have down here in the marching order and what they do. And the way they have chosen to make you to track that is you have these square tokens that you put out. So like if this says to put out enemy H, then you'll put out the mini on the board and you'll put out enemy H with it, and you will know that this mini is then enemy H. And then the way they've chosen to do damage is you have damage tokens. So they're 1 and 3, 3 and 5 and stuff like that. And you put these, if you do 1 damage to this enemy, you put it on the board along with his mini. And so what you eventually have here is you have a mini that's sitting on the board that's moving around quite a lot, and you have a bunch of tokens in the same space as the mini, a bunch of identifier tokens and health tokens. And so you have to move the mini and then move the tokens, and you're sliding stuff around, and it's really super fiddly to fool with these and to try to move all of these components that are in this one space. And a lot of times you get to these squares on the board and they're just kind of crowded with all of this stuff. And coming from board games today, there's so many more elegant ways to handle this, especially when you have dials of health for the bosses. And this is much easier to manage than putting tokens out here and identifiers. And I just kind of wonder why we didn't have several of these dials, labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And granted, there's a lot. There's like numbers up to, I think, L or M or something in here. So there's a lot. It would be a lot of dials, but I can't help but to believe there was a more elegant solution than throwing all of the tokens and throwing all of the identifiers and everything in the square with the enemy so that you have to move everything all around all at once. That just doesn't seem like the best solution to me. Maybe bases or something to identify the mini, just something to keep me where when I can move this guy, I don't have to move and slide a bunch of tokens around, and it's just not so fiddly to deal with. Not to mention, if they end up getting staggered or poison or something like that, you have these stagger or poison tokens that you also put on there. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just put them, on the cards or something like that. Well, the cards get shuffled every time to make that marching order, and so you can't keep everything on the cards because then you lose track. So there's no real way with this system to even kind of streamline it or make it easier. And I would have just really liked to see some bases here, some dials, just something to make this not a bunch of fiddly tokens sitting in a space that I have to move the mini, I have to move the tokens and all that. That just consistently aggravated me when I would slide something and then slide its tokens or pick it up, especially in Weeping Peninsula, because you have enemies that move diagonally and then they bounce back. If they can't go to a certain place, they swap around. So you're moving these enemies a lot in the Weeping Peninsula box, and you've got a ton of fiddly components that you have to move for everyone. I didn't like that. I was not a particularly big fan of that. I wish there was something, especially with the amount of money that this made. I see games making less money, on crowdfunding than Elden Ring made, and they have way better components and way more elegant solutions for these types of issues. And I also think that when you're coming from the standpoint of making this board game off of a video game IP, that you're trying to bring new people to this hobby is one of the reasons why I think you're doing it, right? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think you're trying to bring new people to this. And when you're trying to expose new people to this hobby and you're trying to grow the hobby, I feel like you can come up with some really elegant solutions, something that's really pretty, something that's really cool, that's really neat, that'll make those people go, oh, wow, like, I didn't know that board games could do this. I didn't know that I could have all of these dials and sliders and things. Even that marching order that you put out. Once you put out all of these cards in a row and you're fighting 4 or 5 or 6 enemies and bosses and things like that, this marching order of cards can just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and take up so much table space. And it's just a really inelegant solution for all of this. I mean, it's a lot of room. It's very fiddly. Maybe have decks of enemy cards where they do a thing that you flip over, and then you have initiative tracks. Just something to where I don't have to have 12 cards lined out along, and I'm going over each one and I'm trying to flip it sideways, and it's taking up all of this space once they're used. Just find a more elegant way to do that. Find a way to make people say, oh wow, this is really cool. I didn't know board games could do this, as opposed to putting out a product that's super fiddly. There's tokens everywhere and making people be like, man, now I got to move all of this around. And it feels tedious, and it shouldn't feel tedious. It should feel fun, especially when new people are coming in to the hobby. So that kind of covers my likes and dislikes of this game. So let's go ahead and let's give it a score. So for me, I'm coming in at a 7.5 on this one. I enjoyed the Weeping Peninsula box. It was easy. I like the way very few things trying to transfer over to the Realm of the Grafted King campaign, but the weapons that you've retrieved and things like that, they kind of transfer over, which is really cool. It's not necessary. You can play any of these as standalone, but for me, this one's difficulty at feeling like a long tutorial is kind of the reason why I'm coming in with that score there, and just the fiddliness of the components. And that's going to be a problem with all 3 of these games, with Weeping Peninsula and Realm of the Grafted King and Stormveil Castle, is just kind of how fiddly everything is. So far, I will say that what I've played of the Realm of Grafted King, I have already enjoyed more than this, and I'm only 3 or 4 missions in. So I'm going to give this a 7.5. This is good. Should you get it? Probably not. Probably not. It's just 100% honesty here. Get the Realm of the Grafted King. If you're really into Elden Ring, get the Realm of the Grafted King, because that is the base box. There's so much more in there. This feels like a really long tutorial. I think that's what was intended, which is fine. That's not a bad system, but it feels almost like spend $120 to find out if you like something, so that you can spend $160 later on the base box, so that maybe you can spend whatever Stormveil Castle is. I think it's like 140 or 120 or something like that. I don't know. But it feels like money on top of money on top of money on top of money, and you just don't need the Weeping Peninsula box unless you are very, very, very into Elden Ring. And if you're super into the lore, you're super into the game, and you just want to have everything, you're going to have fun with this. I'm not saying it's not fun. I had a ton of fun with this. Obviously, I sat down and in just a couple days, I played through the whole thing because I had a ton of fun with this game. I like the game. I'm having more fun with Realm of the Grafted King, and I don't feel like I would have had less fun with Realm of the Grafted King if I did not play the Weeping Peninsula. I feel like it's kind of I feel like it adds unnecessary bloat to the experience because it's not required. It's a super long tutorial that you don't need to be there. It's kind of where I'm at with it. It's fun. Is it necessary to the series? No. If you're a huge Elden Ring fan, get it. If you think that you will like this game, don't bother with the starting box. Just go straight to Realm of the Grafted King. You're not missing much here. All right, guys, that's going to sum up my review. Weeping Peninsula, 7.5. I really like it. Is it necessary to the experience? Probably not. Those things are up for you to decide. I hope if you do pick it up, I hope you have a ton of fun with it. I hope you enjoy it, and hope you're like, wow, that guy was wrong. I really love this. And I hope you play through it multiple times, and I hope you get everything you want out of it. If you're considering whether or not you'll like this, it's very true. It's very true to Elden Ring. If you like Elden Ring, you will probably enjoy this experience. I can say that it does translate well to the table. It's just that you don't need the Weeping Peninsula box. I expect that my Realm of the Grafted King score, whenever I review it, will come in at much higher than this. I just don't think it's a necessary part of the of the entire campaign. I don't feel like it's implemented well enough to make it matter. I feel like it's too expensive for what it is. I feel like it takes too long to get good, even though I had fun with it when it was easier and when it wasn't picking up. So, in long story short, it's fun, but it's not necessary. I don't feel like. Get the Realm of the Grafted King box, enjoy it. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, like and subscribe below. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.